Just after 2 on a Thursday, it's the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Hennings producing today's show. You out there. So, Phil's win yesterday, they take 2 of 3 from the Cubs. Is everything back to normal? I got some thoughts on the Phils in the lineup. Bullpen, starting rotation seems to be fine, but there'll be some questions there that we'll get into. But I do want to dive into the lineup and get your thoughts on it. As always, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. I think the Phillies, we talked about 10-game pockets yesterday. And in the last 10-game pocket, they went 1-9. They've won 2 out of the last 3 here, so they're starting a new pocket off on a good, step here, good footing. And one of the things about this one is they have no Bryce Harper in this pocket of games. Now, they didn't have him for the last pocket of games either. So I guess the question that I would have for you is, they just won 2 out of 3 against a good Cubs team. It's not like they won 2 out of 3 against the Pirates. They got swept by the Pirates. Does winning against the Cubs 2 out of 3, is that more impactful than the impact of getting swept by the Pirates? In other words, do you put more stock in who the Phillies are for losing 3 straight to the Pirates? Or do you put more stock in the Phillies for winning 2 out of 3 against the Cubs? Is beating a good team 2 out of 3 more valuable than losing 3 straight against a bad team? How do you quantify that? Is that a question that's unanswerable? Is that one of those things like CNC Music Factory once asked? Things that make you go, Because they win 2 out of 3 against the Cubs, that's pretty impressive. It's a team they could face in the playoffs at some round, DS, CS, whenever. They're not going to face a team like the Pirates in the playoffs, which is why it's frustrating that you get swept by that team, and you're saying, if you can't beat the Pirates, then why should I believe in you? But do I now believe in you because you were able to show me that you can beat the Cubs? See, all these questions seem to have no right answer. So I guess what I'm getting at is the Phillies are winning games. They are 10 games over 500, and they really haven't played that well. Right? 39-29, 10 games over 500 in the wild card right now. And realistically, this team's not really playing its best baseball at all. You take a look at the numbers on this team, and you're wondering, how are they even over 500? Nick Castellanos, by the way, his WAR dropped. He's now a minus .3. Inconceivable. He has the second highest batting average on the team. Alec Boehm. You guys remember what Alec's first month of the season looked like. He was hitting .210. He's got the 3rd highest batting average on the team. Kyle Schwarber at .246 has one of the highest batting averages on the team. So, is the best baseball still to come for the Phillies? How are they 10 games over 500 with guys hitting .246, .237, .234, .210? Brandon Marsh is actually up to .241 all of a sudden. Crazy how that goes. And by the way, Brandon Marsh's on-base percentage, it's .341. .341 for Brandon Marsh. Like, when did this all happen? So I asked these questions thinking to myself, Alec Boehm is an interesting guy to kind of start the conversation off. Let's start with him real quick. So Boehm is an easy hate-to-face guy, right? He's an easy guy that people don't like. He's a tall 6'5" guy. So therefore, the perception is he's 6'5", he plays third base, he should hit a lot of home runs, right? You're a corner infielder, you should hit a lot of home runs. He's got bad body language. Right? He slams his helmet, he throws his bat, and he's just a hate-to-face kind of guy. Right? Boehm is the kind of guy that's easy target to dislike. Big guy, doesn't hit for a lot of power, bad body language, Not a great defensive player, although I think he's worked into a pretty good defensive player. Not a Gold Glove level player, but he's not an abomination at third base any longer. He's worked pretty hard to get himself to be a pretty good defensive third baseman. But offensively, he was horrible in the month of April. Very fair to say he was awful in the month of April. He's also unlikable for other reasons. He grounds into a lot of double plays. He leads the league, I think, in grounding into double plays. I think he's got 11 on the season. Maybe he leads the Phillies in double plays. I don't know if he leads the whole league. You have to fact check me on that one. But Alec Bohm is a very interesting kind of microcosm, I think, of this whole lineup. Because when you start the season one way, so in the month of April, Alec Bohm hit .213, right? .213's miserable. His on-base percentage was .242, also miserable. So all those numbers, when you start the year, that's almost what we remember the most. How you started the year overshadows how you've rebounded and possibly changed the actual real narrative. So Alec Bohm's narrative is .213. That's how you started the year. That's who you are. You stink. .213, 0 home runs, 6 RBI, 18 strikeouts. He was awful. But in the month of May, he hit .324 with a .364 on-base percentage, 5 homers and 13 RBI. And now in the month of June, which has been about 10 games, he's actually hitting .359 with a .390 on-base percentage, 1 home run, 7 RBI. His OPS in May was .873, and his OPS in June is .852. If he keeps up those numbers for the rest of the season, you're probably looking at a guy, if he started April the way he did and then tailed off, you'd be saying, man, Bohm's having a great start to the season. But if he tailed off in May and June, but you remembered how he started the year in April, that might change your overall look at him. But he has been unbelievable in May, and he's off to an even better start in June. He has 20 RBI in the month of May and June. He had 2 in March and 6 in April. He had 8 RBI in the first month of the season. So I guess what I'm looking at here is if Bohm is going back closer to the player he was a year ago, and that's where it seems to be trending, can the others, can we just look at them and say, hey, maybe they just got off to some slow starts, and they're 10 games over 500 with all those guys getting off to slow starts?
Couple things here, Mike. Number one, Alec Bohm is tied for the second most double plays grounded into in the National League. He has 11 this year. He is behind Juan Soto.
So 11 double plays. Juan Soto leads the league. Does Juan
13.
Soto stink?
By the way, Bohm is also tied with Pete Alonso, who has a 300 batting average on the season.
Bohm is not hitting 300, though.
No, I'm saying Alonso's hitting 300, but he's tied with Bohm.
Oh, for how many double plays?
Double plays grounded into.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're hitting in the middle of the lineup. You're more propensity to hit into double plays because generally the guys in front of you are higher on base percentage guys, and Bohm hits the ball hard. And when you hit the ball hard, it's a lot easier to get into the double play because get to the quicker. And Bohm is not the fleetest of foot guy. No. So anything he hits hard on the ground, it's a 6, it's a 4, it's a 3, or it's a 5, 4, 3. Generally, Bohm hits something hard on the ground. He's going to ground into a lot of double plays. That's just the nature of it. But Bohm, in the last 2 months of the season, he's been, I think I saw the stat this morning, 35 games. He's got 46 hits in the last 35 days since May 3rd. So has Bohm turned it around a little bit?
Yes, and I wanted to point out something that you mentioned in passing a couple minutes ago, which is you used the word, Mike, that he has rebounded multiple times in the last 10 minutes. I think it's a very important point because Alec Bohm had an 0-for-4 game in that final series against the Pirates. He bounces back as a great series against the Cubs. He had a 3-strikeout game in the month of May. In the next 6 days after that game, Mike, he was hitting over 300 during that stretch. Alec Bohm is showing you that he may have a bad day here and there, but he doesn't dwell on it. He doesn't stay in that darkness. He is bouncing back. I think it's a huge, huge positive for him because he's not a guy who's staying. He says, I'm going to wipe away the bad day. I had a bad day at the plate. The next day is a good day.
Which is the irony of that is his body language suggests otherwise.
Correct.
His body language doesn't suggest that, hey, I had a bad day, I'm going to move on from my bad day. His body language suggests that this is going to carry over with me, and I'm going to let it bother me for the rest of the day. Listen, I understand Bohm is a very unlikable guy. He's a hate to face, no question about it. The grounding into double plays. Here's something that is interesting. I came across this stat, and I talked about this a while back. This was back on May 6th that we were talking about Bohm, and he was really struggling at that point, right?
Right.
Back on May 6th, Bohm was really struggling, and he was hitting probably in like the low 200s.
He was on the full struggle bus.
He was. And there was a tweet that I saw that I thought was interesting. It says, Alec Bohm had 31 hard hit outs this season. A hard hit out is a ball of at least exit velo of 95 miles an hour. The expected batting average on Alec Bohm's 31 hard hit balls was 355 with a slugging percentage of 692. So in other words, if he hit the ball that hard every single time he came up, he would be hitting essentially 355 with a 692 slug. He ended up hitting 0. Every ball that he hit with an exit velo of 95 or more, he essentially hit right at somebody, or somebody made a really good play. So essentially what it was saying is eventually his luck will spin and that 0.000 batting average will turn into something. Well, I couldn't believe when I actually looked at this morning. Bohm was hitting 213 in April. That was his batting average at the end of April, 213. You know, it's pretty tough to dig yourself out of a 213 hole. In the month of May, he hit 324. In the month of June, he is now hitting 359, which brings his overall number to 283 on the season. And all of a sudden, Bohm has become a factor in the lineup again. Now, is he what you want him to be? Is he great? That's not what I'm saying. I contend very strongly, and I'm a Bohm guy. Bohm should not be hitting 3, 4, or 5 on a really good team. I think Bohm, if he's hitting 6, 7, or 8, you've got a really good hitter hitting 6, 7, and 8. He's not a really good hitter hitting in the middle of the lineup. He's a solid hitter in the middle of the lineup. And solid, the problem with that is he's a solid hitter for the bottom of the lineup. I don't think he's solid enough to hit in the middle of the lineup. But the Phillies have shown with him hitting in the middle of the lineup, they can have success. If he hits like he's hitting right now, the rest of the way, and has become, back to the Alec Bohm of the last couple of years, I think I've changed my batting lineup. All right? When they get Harper back. Because before I said I would go Turner in the leadoff spot and just leave him there. I would hit Bohm 2, Harper 3, Schwarber 4. I think I'm changing that to Turner 1, Harper 2, Bohm 3, Schwarber 4. And my reasoning would be you got Turner and Harper, your top two guys right there, on base guy in Turner, Harper, your best hitter in the 2-hole. And with Schwarber hitting behind Bohm has been a proven RBI guy, right? He has shown over the last 2 years he'll drive you in. He'll figure out a way to get you home. Yesterday he hit a ground ball to third base. That got a guy home. Hit a ball over the fence. He doesn't do that often enough, but he got 2 runs home on that. Then he hit a ball the opposite way for a single. That was another RBI. He hit 4 ribbies yesterday, and he did it in 4 different ways. With Schwarber hitting behind him, he should get nothing but fastballs to hit. Right? They got to go after him. He's the guy they got to go after. So with Schwarber protecting Bohm, it should give Bohm a bigger opportunity to keep the numbers he has right now going. So I think I would go Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber, and then after that, you're back into the whole mix of then what? Castellanos 5. whoever. I don't even like Castellanos hitting 5. I'd rather have him hitting 6 or 7 if I could, but I can't have Bohm, Castellanos, Real Muto. They can't all hit 6 and 7. So somebody of that group's got to hit number 5. I don't care who it is you pick. Castellanos, I guess, would be the guy for now because he hits right-handed. So that would be my pick over the left-handed conglomerate of Stott, Kepler, and Marsh. So I would probably go Castellanos, then probably whoever, Kepler. If he's playing that night, he bats 6th.
6. Real Muto 7, I guess.
Guess so. Then Stott 8. And then
Marsh.
The problem with hitting Stott 8 is then you have Stott and Marsh, both lefties, hitting together. And that's what the problem is. You don't want to hit Kepler 5th, but you got to break those lefties up. So you got to hit one 5, the other one 7, the other one hits 9. Like somebody, you're complaining, why are you hitting Stott in the 5-hole? I don't like hitting him in the 5-hole either, but it's either him or Kepler. And who's worse right now, Kepler or Stott?
Right now, I would say it's Stott, just because I think Stott has regressed.
I think right now, but on the year, Kepler's hitting 210. Kepler's hitting 210. Stott's hitting 237. Kepler's got a 296 on-base percentage. Stott's is 299. The slugging percentage, Kepler's 388. Stott's 332. I mean, these two are realistically, of the three, the guy to hit 5 would be Marsh. If you have a left-handed lineup.
Right.
Marsh's on-base percentage is up to 341. His batting average is 241. It's higher than the other two guys.
Yep.
So really, that left-handed lineup, the left-handed hitters in the platoons are all horrible options. So that would be the top 4 for me, would be Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber.
Which goes back to the question I asked you yesterday, Mike, which is, can you win a championship if Alec Bohm was one of your 4 best hitters?
I don't think so. If Alec Bohm is hitting 3, 4, and 5, I don't think you're good enough. No. But if he's hitting 3, 4, and 5 on this team, I think he's your most productive option of the guys we just listed. Castellanos, Real Muto, Kepler, Stott, Marsh, Otto Kemp, Weston Wilson, or anybody else you want to throw in there. Bohm is the guy. And over the last 2 months of the season, he has been maybe your most productive hitter.
And that's really what, to me, the problem is, Mike. It's nothing negative against Alec Bohm. It's not a anti-Bohm sentiment. It's an understanding that the other guys are such a drop-off from the top 4. If Alec Bohm has to be that important to you because the other guys are so below average, minus WAR, whatever you want to point to, that is the real problem for the Phillies. It's not Bohm. It's the fact that you need Bohm.
But what I thought was
much because of the other guys.
Well, but I thought what I thought was interesting was the fact that the team is 10 games over 500 with almost every guy in the lineup unplayably bad. Yes. Castellanos minus 0.3 WAR. Bohm 0.4.
And that's a credit
Stott,
to the starting staff, right?
Negative 0.2. Real Muto 0.6. Kepler negative 0.1. Marsh negative 0.3. You're thinking to yourself, if all these guys are negative WAR or not even 1, how the hell are you winning any games? And they're 10 games over 500 it's almost fascinating to figure out how they gotten to this point.
It just shows you how good the pitchers have been on this team. Wheeler, outside of the 2 starts, Luzardo's been really good. Sanchez has been reliable and good. Like, the pitching staff has really saved them.
Well, we're going to get into it, and we're going to talk more about all the WAR and all the numbers and what they really mean. Hembo's going to join me on the other side. Paul Hembekides from Get Up. You remember him from Greeny right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll talk about this Phillies team and the numbers that he sees. Which ones stand out about where this team could actually go? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Sports Bash just getting off the ground on a Thursday. We got a lot going on. Hembo, football at 4. unsportsmanlike moment of the day. The Nuggets were at Fenway Park last night. He'll tell you about that trip and more on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 226. I'm Mike Gill, Sports Bass Live. No Phils tonight, but we're going to look at the numbers on the Phils. If I were to tell you the Phils were 10 games over 500, you had a guy in the 4-hole with a negative .3 WAR. Your 3-hitter is a .4 WAR. Your leadoff hitter for most of the season is a negative .2. Other hitters in the lineup are negative .1, and Brandon Marsh is the worst of the group at negative .3. How would that team be 10 games over 500? Are better things to come, or is it supposed to get worse? Paul Hembekides, affectionately known as Hembo from Get Up, joins me now to look at the numbers as we take a look at the Phillies on an off day. Hembo, welcome back, man. How you been?
I've been good. If I'm not mistaken, the last time that you and I had the opportunity to do this, you and I were in New Orleans together, days before the Eagles played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I told you I expected that team to win the game by multiple possessions. You guys looked at me like I had multiple heads, and here we are. Took several months to get back into it. I'm not exactly sure why I decided to make mention of that to establish my bona fides as it relates to something unrelated to what we're about to talk about. But either way, it's always good to hear your voice. You do a great show, and I'm looking forward to talking some ball with you.
Well, Hembo, anytime someone brings back the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, it's a great thing to hear. Just to hear Eagles, Super Bowl, all in the same sentence. I'm sure everybody in the audience is very appreciative of being reminded of that. Now, this Phillies team, people are yearning for them to do something they haven't been able to do since 2008. And with this particular group of guys has come up short the last 3 seasons. I just rattled off a bunch of bad WAR numbers. How much stock do we put into the numbers so far? And this Phillies team, they are 10 games over 500 somehow, but yet the batting averages, the on-base percentages, the WARs, all the numbers that people look at would seem like a team that would be much worse off than a 10 games over 500.
You know, I really enjoyed the way that you characterized that, because one side of the coin says this team should be far closer to 500 than they are right now, based on the underperformance of any number of players in the lineup that are not playing to the back of their baseball card. However, there is a flip side of that coin, and I will present you that flip side. The Phillies, at least as it comes to opponent record, the Phillies by opponent record have played the easiest schedule in the entire sport to date. And so you might look at some of the numbers and say, these guys are underperforming, they're going to progress to the mean. Perhaps not. Perhaps the fact that these guys are performing like this, despite having played the easiest schedule in baseball, is a bit concerning. Let's also look at what they have coming up, and they play a top 10 remaining schedule as it relates to just how good their opponents have been so far. And in baseball, the strength of schedule is far from what it is in football, as you well know. Play 162 times. The best teams win 60% of their games. The worst ones win 40% of their games, and so on and so forth. However, I think you could easily construct an argument that says this is about who the Phillies are supposed to be. And I look no further than their run differential. The Phillies are not a wagon. The Phillies have outscored their opponent by 17 runs in 68 games. And that's about an average baseball team. I think they've actually overachieved a little bit in relation to the underlying metrics. And so I think your outlook on this team is a touch rosier than mine, and I don't know that there's any team in the entire sport, my fandom notwithstanding, more fascinating when it comes to what they might look like the day after the trade deadline.
Yeah, there's a lot there, obviously. The numbers would suggest a team that is not as good as their record. We know a lot of that record has been padded by that 16-4 run that they had against Colorado, the Athletics, stuff like that. They also have outstanding starting pitching, Hembo. How much do you factor in that starting pitching when looking at big picture ceiling for this team?
I think the Phillies are in actually a better position from the perspective of not just their starting rotation, but also their bullpen than the numbers would lead you to believe. Now, look, I understand, like everyone else, the Phillies bullpen right now is unsatisfactory. There is no way that the day after the trade deadline it's going to look like it does right now. Everyone acknowledges that. I think Dave Dombrowski is going to add at least one, if not two pieces, and if he has to fork over, prospect capital the way that he did last year, so be it. Look, by ERA, they have the worst bullpen of any contending team in the whole sport this year. I mean, this is not an opinion. It's a statement of fact. But the reason I'm not as concerned about the pitching staff is because it's not going to look that much like it is right now. So if you think about this thing in a playoff context, and look, the Phillies are going to make the playoffs, whether it be by winning the National League East or more likely via the wild card, they're going to have a starting rotation that you feel fairly good about. Zach Wheeler's a 1. For my money, he's still the best starting pitcher on earth. You feel awfully good about a non-tipping Jesus Luzardo, as we were reminded again yesterday. Christopher Sanchez has been outstanding by and large this season, and I'm telling you right now, I want you to remember where you are when you hear me say this. Andrew Painter is the best pitching prospect in baseball, and it would not remotely surprise me if the first time you see that guy and the next time you see that guy sometime in an October context, you are blown away with how good he is. And so the reason I'm not as concerned about the bullpen is because we've seen Ranger Suarez be multiple and be able to do that. We know that Mick Abel's stuff can play up, and in a playoff context, when being deployed as a reliever, I expect that to carry even more so. And so you're only going to need 3.5 or 4 starters to rely upon in the playoffs, and so the bullpen will naturally get better as a result. What I'm far more worried about, and where I think there's far fewer avenues to improve, is in the lineup. Look, the lineup sets your floor, and we have seen this team's lineup fail it badly each of the last 2 years in the postseason. They totally got away from themselves in Game 6 and 7 against Arizona. They were simply not good enough last year against the Mets. To me, like the baseline, the framework, the foundation of a baseball team is what you can produce on a daily basis when it comes to your run-scoring output. We love to talk about pitching. The Phillies lineup, truthfully, is going to be the determining factor as to whether or not they sink or swim in the postseason.
Hembekides, Paul Hembekides, Hembo's with me right now. We're looking at the Phillies, looking at some numbers here, looking at how this team is actually faring against the numbers that they've put up. Now, we were talking about Alec Bohm before you came on. All right, Bohm to me, now I get ragged on a lot. I like Bohm. I think he's better than people give him credit for, but I would also acknowledge he should not be hitting in the middle of a championship lineup. He should not be a 3, 4, 5 hitter. He's more suited for 6, 7, 8. He got off to a horrendous start, and he's come on recently here, but they're having to hit him in the middle of the lineup. The problem with this team, Hembo, seems to be they really don't have any options to hit in the middle of the lineup with Schwarber in the middle of the lineup. So they moved Stott to leadoff. They moved him back out. Are you pro keeping Schwarber where he is, or do you put him back at the top where he's had and the team has had a lot of success and keep Bohm in that middle spot? I would imagine when Harper comes back, Bohm will probably move to the 5 hole, which is still not ideal. But are you pro Schwarber middle of the lineup or pro Schwarber back to the top?
So I respect and value the question, and I'll answer it. But I have to admit, I think you're asking the wrong one. The Phillies' problem is not where guys are hitting. The Phillies' problem is who is hitting. They don't have.
Oh, I agree with that.
People. Look, I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be standoffish. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. But the problem right now is the Phillies have 4 major league hitters in their lineup, and the back half of it are guys are below average hitters, or guys that are not performing to the back of their baseball cards, as I like to say. And so as a general rule, when it comes to lineup construction, look, you should hit your best hitter second. You should lead off the guy that's going to provide you the most on-base opportunities. You're going to hit your next best guy fourth, and you're going to insulate your next best guy third. As just a very general rule, having talked to front office guys about this, the way that they run the numbers with the math, that's what those numbers spit out. But it doesn't much matter if Alec Bohm's going to be hitting cleanup for you with a OPS plus of 97 when 100 is average. Like, the problem isn't necessarily where the guys are hitting or Rob Thompson's lineup construction. It's that they're not hitting enough. And so I think you're asking a cogent question because you always want to believe that changing someone's responsibility as to where they're stacked in the lineup is all of a sudden going to unlock something, and we have seen it. But as a general rule, guys are pitched based upon what their strengths and weaknesses are, not based on where they're hitting in the lineup. And ultimately, I think that's kind of the very definition of putting lipstick on a pig, for lack of a better term.
You know what, though? I like the answer, and I like the way you approach it because it is such a debate in these parts because of people don't like Schwarber in the leadoff. He's not a typical leadoff, a classic leadoff hitter, but yet the team has had a ton of success with him hitting in that spot. So it has sparked this, it's almost like processors against the anti-processors. You have the old school people who don't think Schwarber is, Ricky Henderson, so he can't hit leadoff. And then you have these other people who say, well, he's got a high on-base percentage, and the team wins when he bats leadoff. So it has kind of sparked, this divide between, when you're taking, texts and calls and stuff from Phillies fans every day, you do have this divide of, well, they need to move Schwarber back to the top of the lineup because they win when he's at the top. But you're right. They are multiple bats short in this lineup. And you mentioned Dave Dombrowski. Painter, I agree with what you said. So does he look to Abel, Miller, Crawford? He hasn't made that big move since he's come to Philadelphia. We heard so much about all the moves he made in Boston and Detroit and Miami to bring in players. He hasn't done that in Philly. Should we think this is the year he does it?
I don't think so. I think, look, as fans, we always want there to be a light switch solution. We always want there to be replace this guy with this guy, and that's going to enable us to fly further faster. But as you well know, and look, you watch the team every day, like the solution in the Phillies case is for the people to get better, for the players to hit more, for the individuals to improve. And that's what the Phillies are missing. They need to internally improve. They need to approach their at-bats more intelligently. They need to hunt and count leverage more effectively. They need to chase less frequently in two strike counts. That's what the Phillies are missing. The Phillies aren't missing anything else. Like what the Phillies need to do. Look, again, Dave Dombrowski going out and doing something groundbreaking notwithstanding, which, again, I don't think is likely considering that. I think this past offseason was the likeliest time for that to happen. But when you run it back with Bohm and when you run it back with Castellanos, those and when you're big free agent acquisition from the perspective of your lineup is adding Max Kepler, like he believes in the core of this team. And that's his MO. Like he is almost loyal to a fault. And so my expectation is that you and I are going to be talking in 3 months, and we're going to have a conversation that rhymes with this one. The key for this team is self-improvement. And obviously, when Bryce Harper is in the middle of the lineup, it makes an enormous difference. But I think if this team is going to come close to reaching its ceiling, they're going to need MV3 to show up. It's going to have to be Bryce Harper with an 1,100 OPS going nuclear and carrying the team. It's going to have to be a June version of Schwarber, who over the course of 3 weeks hits 11 bombs with 19 RBI. It's going to be Trey Turner hitting 410 over the stretch of 25 games and stealing 18 bases over that span. Like, you're paying these people an exorbitant amount of money. They're going to have to play that good and potentially at the same time for this team to wind up scoring the amount of runs that they're going to need to get through an absolute gauntlet in the National League postseason.
Give me your thoughts on the Turner version we're getting here. Topper has said, we want a 380 on base. This is a guy that was kind of billed $300 million player, that he was kind of a five-tool guy. Defense not been great. You tweeted about it about a week ago. You take a look at his defense. He had 26 homers last year. He's not going to come close to that this year. You're looking at a guy, though, I don't know what to make it. What kind of impact is Trey Turner having on this baseball team with the numbers he's putting up? Because you look at the numbers, you would say, this guy's having a pretty good year.
Yeah. So it is not hyperbole to say that you and I could sit in a room, do nothing else except talk about the question that you just asked me for 24 consecutive hours. So I want to ask you in response, before I unpack all there is to unpack. Do you want me to focus on the bat, or do you want me to focus on the glove? Because these are two conversations that are running on parallel tracks, but they're absolutely not intersecting. So how do you want me to answer this question?
So let's start with what impact, because I find it odd. He's hitting 300, 360 on base. 7 homers, 30 RBI. He's stealing bases this year. He's up to 19. He's back in the leadoff spot. What impact does he have offensively for this team?
So this is the best version of Trey Turner that we could ever hope or expect. This is the kind of hitter that I envisioned the Phillies acquiring when they irresponsibly signed him to a $300 million contract. Trey Turner, as you well know, you've seen as many at-bats as I have, if not more. Trey Turner gets himself in the most trouble when he swings out of his bleep and you see him popping the ball up, typically to the shortstop because he's beneath it, and he cheats to his pull side. This is not an appropriate way for Trey Turner to hit because he doesn't impact the baseball the way that those guys with the really high air pull percentage are going to impact the baseball. His hard hit rate is 39%. It's considerably below the league average, which is to say 4 out of every 10 balls he puts into play is, 6 out of every 10 balls he puts into play are less than 95 miles per hour off the bat. He doesn't impact the baseball. He doesn't damage the baseball with his barrel. He is a prototypical leadoff hitter. So the thing that he should be chasing is exactly what Topper said. You want a batting average that rhymes with 300 and an on-base percentage closer to 4 than to 3. And I think the way that he has approached his craft in the batter's box this season has been shrewd, has been intelligent, has been an admission of the fact that in previous seasons he has sold out too much for pull side power, and that has not benefited him. Too many easy outs. That's the kind of thing that we saw the Phillies struggle with in the postseason in each of the last 2 years, and he has been a poster child for it. And so in the batter's box, I love that guy leading off, and I love the way that he has approached his craft this year in the batter's box. He could do very few more things that I could ever ask him, and I certainly don't want him to sell out for any more power, because we know that if he does so, he's going to give away a lot more at bats.
All right, now, the other side of the coin. Paul Hembekides, Hembo's with us. He plays shortstop, a very important position. So there's two things. His impact probably negatively as the shortstop. And would you be, or the Phillies, is it normal in the middle of the season to ask the man to move and change positions, or is that out of the question?
I think it is out of the question. If Trey Turner is going to move, it is going to have to be on his behest. It is going to have to be because he goes to his manager. And for the record, this is something that he should definitively do, but I certainly don't expect him to. It would have to be he knocks on the manager's dad's front door and says, look, for the best thing that this club, for the best way that this club could possibly be this season, I acknowledge that my shortstop play has been unsatisfactory, and thus we should let someone else do it. But I understand that's not how the world works. Like,
right,
that's
exactly.
not how $300 million athletes live. Like he signed with the Phillies, and they signed him in part, and this is on the record, that he could stay at the position, which is a gobsmacking opinion if you know anything about the way that we do defensive metrics these days. And candidly, like, I just watched the guy play. Like, he doesn't pass the eye test either, and I would challenge anyone who just watches the games to argue with me that Trey Turner passes your eye test. I mean, it's like, this is not something for which we can even have a good faith argument. Trey Turner's not a good shortstop. What we could then argue is he passable enough to stay there for the remainder of this year for future seasons? We can't argue whether or not he's a good shortstop. He's not. Like, it's like arguing the color of the sky or the color of the grass. Like, these aren't things that are they're inside the Overton window. I'm saying a true thing, you're saying an untrue thing, and I'm right and you're wrong. Now, how we can layer that conversation as it creates more nuance and debate is a totally different thing. Trey Turner is a wholly unsatisfactory, problematic shortstop, and he has cost the Phillies many runs. He's going to cost the Phillies many more runs, and so they stick him in center field, which they should have probably done a year or two ago.
Well, we'll get to this last question for Hembo here, and it's a tough one, all right? You mentioned Wheeler, you think is the best pitcher on the planet. They've got Luzardo. They've got Sanchez. They've got Suarez. They've got Painter. They've got Abel. And they've got Nola. How does that rotation stack up come playoff time? And which of those guys profile as guys that can help your bullpen?
Oh, I love this question. So there's look, Zach Wheeler is not just like the best starting pitcher in baseball. He is, at least in my judgment, the best starting pitcher in baseball, because he is the defining playoff pitcher of at least recent vintage. I'm not stretching here. Like, he owns the lowest WHIP and lowest OPS allowance of any pitcher in the history of the postseason, and Mariano Rivera is second. Like, this isn't my opinion. These are things that are true. These are things that he has done. And so he's going to start game one. You're going to feel good about it. And I don't mind giving him the ball on 3 days rest if you need it. Christopher Sanchez, to me, is so consistent that I feel great about him in a playoff context, probably in game two. Luzardo's stuff is diabolical. It's phenomenal. So long as he's not tipping his pitches, I'm comfortable with him navigating the order two times through. And the X factor here is Andrew Painter. I'm occasionally prone to hyperbole, mostly because I've worked with Mike Greenberg for 10 years, and so you can blame him for this. Andrew Painter is the second best arm in the organization, behind only Zach Wheeler. And Zach Wheeler, I think, should go to the Hall of Fame someday. Like, Andrew Painter is as good a pitching prospect as I have practically ever seen. And again, at the risk of using hyperbole, I'm talking Steven Strasburg, Mark Pryor, Paul Skeens. I'm talking about pitchers of that ilk. His stuff is phenomenal. His command is phenomenal. At 6'7", he's a behemoth with like 20 inches of vert of ride on his four-seam fastball, with legit 4 pitches that are average or better at such a young age, who can command it so precisely that his whips are consistently below 1, like 0.8. And we're talking about a stat for which, like, if it's 1, it's excellent. He is phenomenal. And so the only question is, like, how soon, how expediently can you prepare him for that moment? Because I'm telling you, like, the first time you see him on NBC Sports Philadelphia, half the people in your audience who haven't seen him before are going to say, I can't believe how good that guy is. The question, of course, is, on October the 9th, when it's 46 degrees and people are going nuts in Queens, are you going to be able to get Juan Soto out with a man on second base? But for my money, it's the second best stuff in the organization right now.
And for your money, do they tell Aaron Nola, sorry, you're not a part of the rotation?
No, I mean Aaron Nola's already told us that himself. That's not a decision we have to make. That's a decision he's made by regressing so much, and now he's obviously dealing with physical ailments. But I don't trust him at all. Like, look, Aaron Nola is one of my favorite Phillies of all time.
How does that conversation go? How does that conversation go with that contract?
That's not the contract is a non sequitur. It's a sunk cost. I mean, look, there's also not to say that Aaron Nola couldn't be a factor in future postseason runs. But Aaron Nola is not remotely qualified at this juncture in his career in relation to the other options the Phillies have to be put in a position to make or break our season. I mean, that's not. I'm not saying something remotely controversial. I mean, he is living in the middle of the zone with average stuff and getting blitzed. Aaron Nola.